Well, another question I have, which is kind of along the same line. So when my husband fell and hurt his arm, around the same time I had a feeling of concern, right? So I was wondering, like, did I intuit that that happened, or did I create it with my bad feeling? Like, how do I know what I'm making up and what I'm hearing, you know, like what's coming in? That's really my question. Like, how do I know when I'm making up something?
Well, first of all, we want to say you're never making it up. You may want to ask the question, which grid is it coming from? In other words, is it inspiration that's coming from my vortex and what I want, or is it coming from something that I've been worried about? But we wouldn't even make too much of a thing about that. Instead, we would go general, and we would acknowledge that I am having feelings, and then we would be more specific in saying, and I'm wanting to get really good at knowing where that feeling's coming from. When you, after the fact, try to remember, and if you do it close enough to an event, sometimes you can isolate what the feeling was. Esther and her sister Jeannie were with friends, and they'd been out on a sort of dock, and Jeannie had been sleeping in a hammock, and Esther and her friend had been visiting, and when they got ready to go, Esther felt a sort of feeling of concern. That's the way she described it to herself. And she said to Jeannie, because Jeannie was asleep, just sit there for a little bit, get your bearings before you begin to walk. Now, Esther's not thinking that Jeannie is clumsy and going to fall in the bay, but she had a sort of feeling of concern. And so they walked in, and they walked up some stairs, and then a little while later they were walking downstairs, and Sister Jeannie tripped on something imaginable, or thought that she was at the bottom and she wasn't, but she broke her foot. So then after the experience, Esther is asking herself, did I create it? Did I feel it coming? Why did I feel concerned about Jeannie? And then in a very short period of time, something happened. And so later that day, she's talking to Jerry about it, because these are longtime friends, and she knew Jerry was hanging around with them. They were all having a very good time. And so Esther said to Jerry, what do you think went on? What was that feeling of concern? And Jerry said to her, well, you translated as concern. I was just envisioning you all paying attention to what you were doing. You were on new surfaces. You were wearing new shoes. I was just projecting, as he always did. That was always what Jerry would say. He was always saying, watch your step. He was always offering his arm. And so he was just doing what he always did. But Esther translated it in a more knowing what she didn't want than knowing what she did want. Well, you just have to work that out. But what we want you to hear from this conversation is that Source is always guiding you toward what you want. And if you are translating it into what you are calling concern, then you are vibrationally a little bit out of whack. One of the most common things as people begin to feel inspiration and begin to understand that they are intuitive, or that they do have broader perspective that's helping them, is that you sometimes want non-physical to save you from difficulties. You want non-physical to help you watch out for those potholes, or to keep you from and that's not the way the non-physical part of you is working. The non-physical part of you is always expecting a good outcome. And every time you feel negative emotion, you have strayed from the positive expectation that is being flowed to you. Don't you love knowing that? So Esther could never say, inner being or Abraham, why did you not warn me? Because we're not ever going to warn her about anything. We're always just going to hold the standard of what we know she wants. And when she feels that way, she's deviated from her true course, you see.
Beautiful.
It is indeed.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
This is a good time for a segment of refreshment, or maybe for ending of this day, which will be a long segment of refreshment. We're off on a very good footing, aren't we? Have fun with it. There's no homework. There is great love here for you.